Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today for our Cross-Sector Impact Grants informational webinar. Welcome. We're really excited to talk with you today about this brand new program, possible due to generous support from the National Endowment for the Arts. We're planning on taking about an hour of your time today, and I do want to note that after this webinar is finished, it is being recorded and will be posted on the South Arts website. So you can go back and refer to this webinar at any time leading up to the letter of interest deadline. To give you a quick idea of what we're going to cover today, first we're going to do some quick introductions so you know whose voices you're hearing here on the presentation. We're then going to do a program overview, talk a little bit about the background, how this program came to be. We'll then dig into the program requirements, going through those guidelines with you so that you can understand those a bit better. And then finally, we will have time for a Q&A session at the end. You'll note at the bottom of your screen, there is a place for you to type in your questions. One of my colleagues is monitoring those questions, and if it's a quick, simple question, you'll get a fast response to that. But then when we will have an extended period for some Q&As at the end. So if you have a question for that session, go ahead, type it in there, and we'll be reading those off and answering those at the end. So first off, we're really excited to have 3 South Arts staff members joining us here today. Susie Circumer, who is the Executive Director at South Arts. Molly Quinlan-Hayes, Deputy Director for Programs, as well as the Accessibility Coordinator and Arts Ready Director. And Ivan Shustak, Director of Communications and Development at South Arts. I'm Michelle Grove-Herzog, Principal of Zog Arts Consulting. And I have with me here Philip Horn, who's a Senior Advisor with our firm, and we're really excited to be your Cross-Sector Impact Grants Coordinators. Philip, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm recently retired after 25 years as the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. Before that, I was 11 years with the California Arts Council. I guess my specialty over the years has been developing these kinds of partnerships in Pennsylvania to better serve Pennsylvanians. We now have more than 30 partnerships in place, most of them for more than 20 years. And in California, I developed an evaluation handbook with, for, and by teaching artists. And I hope to be able to use some of that information, share some of that information with you. And I am a formally trained facilitator with 30 years of experience as a facilitator, and I'm just delighted to be part of this.
And prior to beginning Zog Arts Consulting, I had over a decade of experience in grant making, primarily at the public level, so at local and regional arts agencies. I have also worked as a university presenter and also worked as a professional musician for a period of time before that. So I'm really excited to bring that background and experience really from all sectors or all sides of the presenting field and the arts field to help with this program. I'm going to hand it over to Molly over at South Arts just to give us a little bit of background about who is South Arts, what is South Arts?
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Philip. We're pleased to have so many of you interested in on the webinar today. So I'm assuming and we're hoping that many of you may be new to South Arts and what we do. We're one of 6 regional arts organizations. We're an official partner of the National Endowment for the Arts and the 9 South Arts, Southern State Arts Councils are members of South Arts. We're a nonprofit and we're based in Atlanta. We've existed since the 70s, and we regularly evolve our mission and our programs to be responsive to our region. We work in all disciplines: performing arts, visual and media arts, film, literature, and traditional and folk arts. We have long-standing programs you may have heard of, such as the Performing Arts Exchange, our Performing and Literary Touring Grants, the Southern Circuit Tour of Independent Filmmakers, and Arts Ready, a national program assisting arts organizations to build readiness plans to withstand crises. Our newer programs include Jazz Road to support jazz tours and residencies across the country, In These Mountains, which is supporting Appalachian traditional arts and foodways, and Momentum, which is building the touring capacity of Southern dance companies. We're pleased now to be introducing these new cross-sector impact grants, and Michelle will be talking a little bit more about how this new program connects to South Art's new mission and goals. Thanks, Michelle.
Great, thanks, Molly. So Philip and I are really excited to talk with you today about this brand new program from South Arts. So this program is designed to support partnerships between the arts and non-arts sector in creating or developing programs that address the challenges and strengths our communities face today. So, for example, an eligible project may include a program which addresses arts and aging. It may be arts and youth nutrition, or arts and homelessness. And again, these are just examples of the types of partnerships that might be eligible for this program. And when I'm using the word arts, talking about this arts and, I'm talking about all arts forms. So as Molly just noted, South Arts works across all arts disciplines. So this is everything from performing arts to literary arts to traditional arts. So for this new program, in general, we are looking for applications from new partnerships. Now, we do expect to have subsequent funding cycles. However, this first funding cycle is, as you'll note, a bit of a compressed project period. So for this first cycle, projects which deepen or expand existing partnerships are also encouraged to apply. We encourage you to think expansively about possibilities for projects and partnerships for this program, and to think about creative and varied approaches. So what we're looking for in this program is not to support ongoing outreach programs while we do greatly value these programs, but rather to help you as applicants leverage your partnerships and develop them in new and exciting ways.
This program, this is Philip. This program addresses two strategic goals for South Arts: connecting artists and arts professionals in the South to resources that will increase opportunities for success within and outside the region, and advance impactful arts-based programs that recognize and address trends and evolving needs of a wide range of communities in the South. The arts and artists play an incomparable role in addressing challenges and employing the strengths of communities. I like to say that artists are the all-terrain vehicles of the imagination, theirs and ours. They can take us anywhere, address any issue or circumstance, and engage others in powerful ways. This is what we hope to harness for the benefit of communities in the house. Change, of course, is a constant, and that's certainly true in the South. And we're hoping that you and South Arts can be partners in making positive change for communities in the South.
Great. So as I mentioned, this is a brand new program for South Arts, and so we're really unsure about how many applications we are going to receive. And I would say, based on the great interest we have here today, the number of people joining us on this webinar, it looks like we're going to have great interest in this program and a great number of applications. We do know, based on the funding available, that we will be able to fund approximately 10 to 15 applications, and that's fully funding those applications, which we'll touch on in just a bit in more detail. We are going to be using a two-part application process for this new program, and this is really to help lower the barrier for entry by requiring just a letter of intent, and to also reduce the burden on potential applicants. Again, that initial step is just a letter of intent rather than a full application. So I want to run through that timeline with you briefly here. The first deadline that's important and what we're focusing on here today in this informational webinar is the letter of interest deadline, and that is Thursday, July 18th, 2019, and that is an online deadline. You will be submitting that letter of interest online. For those applicants who are invited to submit a full application, you'll be notified no later than Thursday, August 1st. And then those full applications will be due Monday, August 26th, so almost a month later, to complete that full application. Next, for those that do submit a full application, you'll receive notification the week of September 9th. And the project period for this first round of grants is September 15th, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. So let's look a little bit at the project requirements. So for this new partnership program, we are looking for 2 principal partnering organizations or artists. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't have additional individuals or organizations involved in your project, but you are limited to 2 principal partners who will be the primary applicants for this program. Now, for these 2 partners, one must be from the arts sector and one must be from a non-arts sector. For example, an eligible partnership may be a nonprofit arts organization or unit of government and a nonprofit organization or unit of government from a non-art sector, or it may be an individual artist or ensemble and a nonprofit organization or unit of government for a non-art sector. So important to note in those sample eligible partnerships that an artist or arts organization without a non-arts partner is not eligible for this program. Now, your project should address and advance an issue of importance to your community. You must include a minimum of 2 public-facing events held in accessible facilities as part of your project. Now, what we mean by public-facing is that one event must be a public event, and this could be an exhibit, screening, reading, lecture, or other activity that provides individuals with an arts experience or encounter. It can be free or ticketed, but it must be marketed to and open to anyone who wishes to attend. Now, the second activity can include an additional activity as previously described, or it can be an activity that provides context, deeper understanding of the project, including an arts experience, art form, or artistic process, or an activity that reaches a targeted group, such as students, a business group, artists, patients, care providers, etc. And I do want to remind everyone 2 things. One, that these are minimums, not maximums. So you need a minimum of 2 public-facing events. However, if you have more, that's also okay if that's part of your project design. Also, between these 2 public-facing events, remember that one must be marketed and open to everyone, and the other, it's okay if that's for a more targeted constituency. The other thing about these public-facing events and your projects is that you must provide accessibility for constituents with disabilities. And to expand upon this a little bit, I'm going to ask Molly, as the accessibility coordinator for South Arts, to just give us a bit more detail.
Great, thanks, Michelle. South Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts are committed to full accessibility to the arts by everyone. It's been almost 30 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, was passed. So by this point, we are looking for our arts partners to go above and beyond mere compliance with the ADA and looking beyond physical access, say, for folks who use chairs and scooters. With more and more Americans aging, whether they identify as disabled or not, we think you'll be benefiting your own organization and community by making your programs and settings more open and accessible. Large print labels and programs, amplified vocals in any setting, casual seating in large spaces, these can be helpful to many of your visitors and participants, as well as using audio description, American Sign Language interpretation, touch tours, and other accommodations that make your offerings more accessible. We also ask you to consider the backstage, in quotes, making sure that any guest artists who require accommodations are able to participate fully in your activities. And accessibility services and expenses are eligible as part of your project budget. Thanks, Michelle.
Great.
I would just like to add that our accessibility consultant in Pennsylvania always reminded us that the accessibility issue was really just about insanely great customer service. What are we willing to do? Practically anything to make it possible for people to participate in these programs.
Great. So there's a bit of an expansion on those project requirements. We're talking about arts disciplines and that non-art sector or community impact area. So what you see in front of you is a list of sample arts disciplines and community impact areas. And you can find this list in the grant guidelines posted at southarts.org as well. I'll emphasize that these are samples and not limiting. I will also emphasize, going back to the partnership between the two applicants and between the arts discipline and the community impact area, that we are really looking for a true partnership between these two sectors and a true. So this, to us, and for purposes of this program, means not just delivering or providing a service or program to another organization or constituency, but truly working together on this project. So that means developing the program together, having some shared goals, and also some level of shared risk as part of your project. Now, in terms of those two applicants, their eligibility, to review this very quickly, applicants must be permanently located or reside in South Arts' 9-state region. And just to review those 9 states quickly: Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, or Tennessee. Both applicants must be in good status with South Arts, which simply means that you have no outstanding reports or other obligations to South Arts. And both applicants must agree to acknowledge South Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts in their materials for this program. Now, one applicant, not both, but one of the applicants must be a nonprofit, tax-exempt organization or unit of government, which will be verified through the application process. And you must have a DUNS number, which is a federal identification number for purposes of grant making. And there's more information available about DUNS numbers on the South Arts website as well. The other thing to note here is that for these projects, generally, in order to maximize community impact and potential for long-term impact and sustainability of the project, the engagement of local artists is preferred, meaning that the two partners are located in the same community. However, artists from outside of the project's community or region are eligible, provided that strong rationale for bringing in an outside artist is provided. That said, all artists must meet the minimum eligibility requirements above and permanently reside in one of South Arts' 9 member states.
Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the budgetary requirements and opportunities here, and a little bit about match. I have a question in front of me that says, what is a match? Well, one thing a match is something used to ignite something else, and that's what we're interested in. South Arts is interested in igniting things that haven't been in place so far. InKind, you may already know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's a service or supplies you would otherwise need to buy. We anticipate fully funding 10 to 15 projects. That means you need to be realistic with your budget and your grant request. This is not the kind of program where you ask for more than what you need so that you can get what you want. You need to be sure that you can match your request. And if you feel that you can't meet these requirements at this time, then you might want to wait for the second round of applications. So very quickly, the maximum amount you can request is $15,000, right? The minimum request is $5,000. You can see there. A one-to-one match is required. So you need to make sure that you are in a position to provide that match, or you should maybe wait for another round. Half of the match can be in kind. So if you request $10,000, you have to match it with $10,000, but half of that, $5,000, can be in kind. And remember, we expect to fully fund the requests. The match cannot, however, be supplied by the time of using time of salaried staff. And then here's a list of eligible and ineligible expenses that Michelle will review for you. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, okay. These examples here are not meant to be comprehensive or complete. Other expenses may be eligible. Ineligible experience, however, are not negotiable. Most of these are requirements that come with federal funding. Just remember, keep in mind that as you're preparing a budget is just a plan expressed in dollars and cents. The budget and the LOI or project application should illuminate and complement each other. Is the narrative saying the same thing as the budget? Again, this will be posted for you so you can have a chance to come back and check this later. I also want to, underscore again the business about accessibility and how important it is that you address that. If you have questions about that, if you have concerns about how to address accessibility in your circumstance, assistance can be available to you to help you think through that.
Yeah, and those costs are also, they are eligible expenses. So any additional costs associated with providing accessibility for your participants.
Yes, thank you.
Great. So we know that, the budget is always a hot topic. And so we wanted to provide for you here just a really, what I believe to be a rather straightforward sample budget. I'm going to emphasize that for the letter of interest process, we have developed a budget template, and you'll find that link throughout the guidelines as well as on the letter of interest submission page. And so you must use the budget template with your LOI submission. And that's, you see this sample here uses that LOI template. There's a few pieces for you to fill in at the top of that template. You're going to add the two names of the applicants as well as the name of your project, and also list your project period. Now for this sample project, we're looking at an overall project budget of $10,000. And as we just went over, because this program requires a one-to-one match, if you have a $10,000 budget and you need to match that, $1 for every dollar in grant support provided, you can request up to $5,000, and you must match that with an additional $5,000. Now, again, as you can provide up to 50% of the match can be in kind. So again, in kind is a good or service that you otherwise would have needed to pay for, but has been donated to you. So we have a great example here. If you look at income on this sample budget, you'll note that we have $2,500 of in-kind income. And in the description, that's $500 in paint that was donated by Home Depot, as well as a $2,000 discount on space rental. Now, any sort of in-kind income should also be reflected in your expenses. So if we jump down to those expenses, because again, these are expenses that you would have had to pay for if they hadn't been donated. Within the supplies, we have listed paint, brushes, gloves, and other materials. And we know that $500 of that, the paint, was donated. And when you jump up to space rental, you'll note that that would have been a $2,000 expense, but that was a donated space that you were able to use. So again, we're going to be posting by Friday after this webinar an FAQ document on the South Arts website. So questions about the budget, reviewing some of these items, you can visit that FAQ page. And if you still have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask them. So we're going to take a look at the review criteria, and you'll note that we've tried not to read to you too much on these slides, but this review criteria does need to be gone through thoroughly, and so we're going to read through the criteria with you because they're very, very important. So in preparing your letter of interest, we understand that you're not going to be able to fully address all of these criteria in the same way that you will be able to should you be invited to submit a full application. However, we will be using this criteria and evaluating the letters of intent on their potential to most closely address these. So the first thing we'll be looking at is artistic quality. So the project demonstrates artistic excellence as evidenced by the artists, and apologies for skipping that slide so quickly, as evidenced by the artist's record of achievement and work samples, which will be included in the full application. That the artistic component of the project is appropriate and well suited to meeting project goals. So that the correct art form, the correct art project makes sense for what you're trying to accomplish. Project design, which is the second quarter of your points. Project description should be clear and include the who, what, where, and when of the project. So it's very clear to the readers of that application exactly what's going to happen. Your partnership should be clearly described with the roles and parameters clearly defined, and how and why the partnership is necessary for the success of the project. And lastly, under project design, the project should establish and/or advance relationships across sectors, which is one of the primary goals of this program.
And community impact is, I think, really what this project is all about. What is the community that you intend to serve, and in what way are you going to do that? Who are you targeting for participation? How will you reach them? How will you engage them? How will you invite them to participate? What will be the impact on individuals and the impact on the community? What is it that you hope to happen? What's going to make you smile at the end of this project if you've been successful? As far as capacity is concerned, demonstrating capacity, if you have done projects like this in the past, that's probably the best way to demonstrate your capacity for something like this. So if you've done anything like this before, it would be useful to address that. At the bottom then, you'll see we've already addressed a little bit of budgeting, about financial planning, and the ability to provide the match. Finally, an evaluation plan. This is something that that often makes people a little bit crazy. Since this is a partnership, we expect that there will be different goals for different partners, just as the different partners have different missions and perhaps different constituencies. So I think the question that you want to answer is, how will these two partners with different goals work together to address these separate goals? For those of you who are invited to submit a full application, there will be some additional assistance available to you, including a one-on-one session to help you think about how you will evaluate this project, how you will know not only at the end of the project, but as you progress, whether the project is succeeding for both partners. I want to talk a little bit about readiness and about this partnership idea and what it's involved. These are not, by the way, additional funding criteria. These are meant to help you think through and prepare your letter of interest and later perhaps a full application. Again, what are the goals of the different partners? They will be different. How are these differences complementary? Where might these conflict? What do you consider to be the strengths and weaknesses of the partners? Are they complementary? Will these differences help the partners do their work better? Will a partnership with an organization, for example, provide you access to a community or a constituency that you have been unable to address in the past? Is there an opportunity for a non-arts organization to better serve its community, its constituency, its clientele by working with an artist or an arts organization. Other important things to consider is the difference in scale of the operation of the partners and their culture. Is one larger than the other? If so, how might that affect the relationship? Again, these are not eligibility requirements or funding criteria. These are things we believe you ought to consider. Is there a plan for sharing any revenue or deficits? Who will receive the money and how will the money be distributed? And what are the considerations for ongoing communications and benchmarks along the way? Again, these will be, this webinar will be posted so you can come back and review these again, as well as submit any questions if you have them.
Great. So once you've thought through this, you've established your partnership, you've developed your initial project plan, what is required for this letter of interest that we're referring to? So the first thing for the letter of interest is the letter itself, or the narrative. And this is limited to 2 pages. So we are not looking for a full grant application. We're not looking for an entire short story. We are limited to 2 pages. And there are 4 main points for you to address in that narrative. The first is, who are the partners and what is the nature of their relationship, including why are you working together? Have you worked together in the past? What has drawn you to each other? How are you complementary to each other? The next is the main activities of the project. So this is that who, what, why, where. And again, this is just a short description, but you should provide the readers with a good overview so that readers walk away of the LOI can walk away understanding what the main activities will be. This also should address why this artistic choice was made for this project. So again, why this art form and how does it match with the community impact area and the outcomes that you're looking for? And also addressing here if this project is already underway. So is this a deepening or expansion, or is this new? When and where the project will take place. So again, tying into the main activities of the project, being able to understand exactly what will happen. And then lastly, the anticipated impact of the project. So what are the outcomes you're looking for? And again, for those that are invited to submit a full application, we will have some assistance available to help you think through impact, evaluation, and how you might measure that. But at this initial point, what is anticipated? What are you looking for? And this should include a description of the intended participants or community that you're looking to serve.
I would like to just add that, one of the pieces of advice I give to people who are preparing grants is to ask, so what would I see if I dropped in on this project at various points? Who would be there? What would they be doing? What kinds of activities would be going on? Could you describe the place for me, describe the participants for me, describe the activities for me, and how would I know if, as a visitor, if this is working? I think all of those things, and the more specific you can be about that, I think the more easily your application will be understood. We understand that you have goals and values and things like that we all share. And I think more important than that is being able to communicate clearly to a panel just what it is you're proposing to do.
Great. So the next piece that you need to prepare is that preliminary budget using the South Arts template. And that's the template that we just took a look at when we were going over the budget and the matching requirements. It's understood that this is a preliminary budget and that if invited to submit a full application, that things might shift slightly. The full budget submitted with a full application will also be a bit more extensive. We'll have a little bit more detail. So again, this is preliminary. If a cost slightly changes once you look into it more, that will be okay. The last piece of the letter of interest is going to be some demographic and basic information that's requested. I'm going to emphasize that the demographic information being collected through the letter of interest process is purely for informational purposes and is not used in the review process. So this demographic information is used for internal South Arts analysis and research, as well as provided to other funders who may require this information to understand exactly who South Arts is reaching. Now, I mentioned that the letter of interest would be submitted online, and the letter of interest will be submitted through Formstack. The deadline is Thursday, July 18th, so that's about a month away, and these must be submitted no later than 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I always say submit early, submit often. Really what I want to emphasize is submit early on this program. You never know when there's going to be a thunderstorm that takes down your internet, or that document just won't upload to the site for some reason. Both fortunately and unfortunately, there won't be any staff available to help you at 11:57 p.m. if you're encountering technical difficulties with Formstack as well. So be sure to get that letter of intent complete and in advance. And I encourage you not to wait right until the last minute of that deadline. So speaking of that form, what you see here is just a section of that form to give you a taste of what it looks like. This is an online form. It's submitted through an online program called Formstack. You don't need an account for this program. You don't have to log in. It's simply an online form that you go to. You'll note here that you cannot save your work in this form. It's a very short form. However, because you're preparing some more extensive documents, that narrative for your LOI and your budget using the budget template, you'll want to prepare those two documents in advance and then go to this form and fill it out. Once you have those two documents prepared, it should be relatively quick and painless to go through and fill out the requested basic fields and upload those documents. You'll note that on this form, all fields are required. Again, there's not too many of them. It shouldn't be too scary. And you're going to upload the narrative and budget. The letter of interest, that document, can be uploaded as either a PDF, a JPEG, or a DocX. The project budget template is provided as an Excel document or an XLSX file, and so that should be uploaded also as an XLSX file. That was a tongue twister there. Lastly, once you hit submit form, that last arrow there down at the bottom, while you can't save your work, you will receive an email confirmation. So that's how you know that your submission went in. And from that email confirmation, you have a copy of exactly what you submitted. So this form, as well as a link to those two documents. So you have that for your records. So just a quick overview on the full application. Again, our emphasis here is on the letter of interest, but just to give you an idea of what would be expected.
So we would recommend strongly that you check the website on a periodic basis. Certainly check it before you submit your application to look at the frequently asked questions and the other questions that are submitted today and subsequently. We will not be able to review your letters of intent, but we can answer any of the questions that you post, and you can certainly benefit from the questions that other applicants might ask. So again, we suggest that you come back to the website from time to time, and certainly before you finally submit your application, before you finish your final draft, check in and see if there is more information that can be helpful to you. I'll remind you again that a limited number of those people submitting letters of interest will be invited to submit a full application. If you are not one of those who are selected, please remember that we anticipate having another round of funding, and that when you submit your application, you will be submitting it, the application, through another platform, eGrant. You will not be submitting it through Formstack. So the applications, you can see here on the full applications, you can see the information here on the screen. We will be providing additional information and instructions to those applicants. We will have time to make time to have individual conversations with you about your evaluation strategy.
Great. And those notifications, if you are invited to submit a full application, you'll be notified no later than August 1st. So really exciting. We've gotten to the point where we're ready to take your questions. So I think Molly has been monitoring those questions throughout, and we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can for you here today.
Great, thank you. This is Molly. I'll just mention some of the more general questions that have come up. One relates to the different partners, questions about if the partner can be in another community, can it be another arts organization, can it be a fiscally sponsored organization. Generally, we are requiring that the arts partner, whether that's an artist and ensemble, or an arts organization, have as their principal partner a non-arts organization. And as Philip described, we're looking for fairly some equality or balance in what each of those partners bring to the project and expect to get out of the project. Also, as we are re-granting National Endowment for the Arts funds, we're prohibited from funding fiscal agents or organizations other than 501c3s, government entities, or schools. If an artist is the lead arts partner, we're still determining if funds could go directly to the artist or would need to funnel through the nonprofit, which then would pay the artist fee. But if you are an individual artist, either as a principal partner or as a guest artist in the project, your fee is very much eligible as part of the grant. We have a question about the what we call public-facing events. In general, we're hoping that one of these would be accessible to the general public, whether that's free or ticketed is up to you and your goals. One of them can be more targeted, for instance, for a group within a school, within a recovery center, within a justice institution. And we're really looking for something beyond just two twin, say, performances or readings, but at least one of them gives participants a deeper look into the work, whether it's the artistic process, the art form, the artwork, again, just to build a deeper sense of engagement.
Just to expand a little bit on what Molly is saying is that we don't want to exclude people who are confined or who have limited access to public venues. There are all kinds of requirements, legal and otherwise, that might make that impossible. But we feel that it is possible and it is important for the public to know and understand what it is you're doing. That could take the form of just describing the project. It could be that if there are artistic products that are the result of the product, that those might be shared with the public. And again, there should be two public-facing events about your project.
We've also had a number of questions about the match. Michelle, would you mind just going back over, for some people who may have come in late, how the match works? And while you get to that slide, I'll say that because, again, these are regrants of NEA funds, we've had some questions. Can you apply for and receive one of these grants in addition to another South Arts grant? This fiscal year, the answer is yes. Folks have also asked, can we receive this grant if we've also directly received an NEA grant? And the answer is yes. Both of them have the caveat that you cannot match federal funds with federal funds. So you cannot use CSI grant funds from us to fund, to be a match for another federal grant, whether it's from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Endowment for the Humanities, or the Institute for Museum and Library Services. And the same is true, you could not use this to be your match for a South Arts grant of some other sort. So Michelle, I'll let you review the actual match requirements.
Only use a match once, right?
So we're going to start with a few definitions to review this. So what is a match? A match means that for every dollar in grant funds you are given, you must provide or match that with a dollar. So it's a dollar for dollar to the grant funds. So if you receive a $5,000 grant, you must match it with $5,000.
You need to spend $10,000 on the project.
Yep. If you have a $15,000 request, you must match it with $15,000 for a $30,000 total budget. And everything in between. That's the minimum and maximum grant request. So that your project, because the minimum grant request is $5,000, and you know you must match that dollar for dollar, that means the minimum project budget for this grant program is going to be $10,000. And this gets back to a lot of what we've been talking about, and that we are looking for more substantial projects here and real partnerships that have potential for great impact in the community, both in the immediate time, but also long-term impact as well. So that's the match piece. Okay. Now, of that match, up to 50% of it can be in kind. What is in kind? In kind is a good or service that has been donated to you that you otherwise would have needed to pay for. The samples we have in this sample budget are paint that has been donated from Home Depot, or a discount or donated space for your project. Other examples, any type of material might be eligible. If your project requires a specialist who might work with you and they agree to give you a discount on their service, the discount from them could be considered in kind. So it's any expense for your project that you would have had to pay cash for, that you found a donation for instead. So for your match, up to 50% of that can be in kind. So that means the other way to look at that is that a minimum of 50% of it must be a cash match. So you must have or must be able to obtain that other 50% of the match, or 25% of your total project budget, in cash. So looking at this sample budget here, you need to have a minimum of $2,500 in cash as part of your match. And the sample here, this project has addressed this looking at two different sources. So these organizations, they had some cash on hand, maybe a rainy day fund set aside for startup funds for a new project or program. So they're going to use $1,000 of their cash reserves on this project. They've also put in for and expect to receive, again, we're at the letter of intent phase right now, a government grant. And in this case, this is a local government grant, and they expect to receive $1,500 from the Community Impact Grant Program of Post-it County. I know one of the questions that I've heard is whether or not you need to have your entire match on hand. For this letter of intent stage, we are not asking you to go into detail about a narrative about where your match is coming from, whether or not it's confirmed, do you have it in hand yet, or is it expected? That will be part of the full application process. But again, in keeping this program accessible and trying to keep the burden, since we know this is going to be competitive, to lower the burden and not have so many applicants spend the time that it takes to submit a full application. This letter of intent is intended to be a less burdensome process.
And as Michelle pointed out earlier, anything that you receive as an in-kind donation also has to show up on the expense side. So the two have to match. So if you look at the spreadsheet that she created, the space rental under expenses is $2,000. That's being donated. That shows up in kind as $2,000 discount on space rental. And again, under supplies, you see paint as one of the things that's listed. Again, 500 of that $1,000 is a donation from Home Depot.
And looking at this example, you know, it's possible that you have part of a line item that's been donated, or for space rental, you know, these items match exactly, so the space was provided for free, but it might be that you got a discount. They agreed to give it to you for half the price, and that would also be okay in the budget. You just want to make sure that's where that description column on this budget template comes in handy. You can provide the additional details so that for the readers of this, of your budget, they understand where those numbers are coming from.
Let me just, for the purposes of reporting, of course, you need to be able to document the value of the in-kind contribution. You need to have something that makes it clear the full retail value, if you will, and the amount of the discount. And you need to document that in one form or another.
Okay. Great.
Molly?
Great. Sorry, I've been typing away at other questions. Sorry if you can hear my typing. A couple questions about the engagement of an artist in the project. First of all, an individual artist or an ensemble or collective can be the arts partner as one of the two lead partners. At this time, we're trying to determine if we're able to pay that artist directly again, or if their funding would have to run through the nonprofit. We should be able to answer that question in our posted FAQs in a couple of days. Or an artist could be engaged by one of the nonprofit partners as just part of the overall project design and budget. That's perfectly acceptable. We did have a question about whether an artist would have to be part of the project at all, which, you know, we're getting questions now we hadn't thought of. So I think that if there were staff members or other personnel involved in the two partners that could fulfill the artistic needs, but you should keep in mind that the ultimate product of these programs is intended to be people from your community interacting with or encountering arts, having an arts experience. And so something that is internal and may serve an internal group of artists or makes some enhancements within an organization might be very worthy activities. But if it doesn't have a public facing component, then that's not really what this program is designed for.
And I think to expand on that, Molly, one way to think about it is that these are outward facing projects. Meaning the overall goals and outcomes should be directed towards a community or public. It is not, these are not for internal capacity building or the internal development of an organization.
I mean, I think it is possible that people would encounter a work or works of art without the actual living artist being present and there being some kind of process about the encounter between the community and the works of art. I don't know what that would be offhand, but you know, anything is possible.
There were a couple of other questions about the artist piece. We would anticipate that most eligible projects would involve an artist and our organizations working within the same community. However, we certainly can see that there could be a case made for bringing in an artist from outside of your community, particularly if they have a particular skill set. For instance, if you have a project that is dealing with creative aging or with veteran populations, there are certainly artists who have specific training and or experience in those kinds of areas. And so you can certainly make the case for bringing them into your community. However, it is South Arts policy that all artist fees go to artists who reside within our 9-state area. So they can be outside of your community or outside of your state, but they would need to reside in one of our 9 states.
And that's not, clearly, that's not a limiting factor. But I do want to point out that, the idea of this is to have an impact over a long period of time. And using local resources is an important way to make things sustainable. So in Molly's example, if you did bring an artist in from outside, one of the things that you would want to consider would be training local artists to do what the visiting artist brings to the project.
There are a couple of questions about the match. Yes, you certainly can have earned revenue be all or part of your match. That is, entrance fees, performance tickets, that sort of thing. We do, in terms of the InKind Match, we are looking for expenses that are specifically obligated to this project. For instance, indirect expenses, overhead to cover your ongoing facilities rent and utilities are not eligible for either the grant funds or the match. However, if you're renting a facility specifically for this project, if you're engaging contractors specifically for this project, if you are using supplies that your organization has already acquired but are going to be used up during this project, the value of those things can be part of your match. Let's see. A couple of people are asking about including images or visual documentation with the first narrative. I think that's a question that it's the first time we've received that question. So I think we'll need to respond to that after some internal conversation, but we'll post that in our FAQs. Looking for some other questions that we may not have answered yet. Can you submit more than one letter of interest? At this time, no. We're really given the interest in this and the capacity. I think we'll probably keep this to each partner organization can only be named in one application or letter of interest in this first round. The grant cannot be used for a competition or fundraisers. That's been asked. Can the budget for the total project be greater than $30,000, knowing that the grant ask can only be up to 15? Yes, we've had a couple of questions like that, and it certainly can. However, the intent of this program is to support, if not new programs and partnerships, then a very intentional expansion or deepening of an existing program. It's unlikely that something that was a small grant to fill a funding gap in a much larger project that's already in the works would be competitive in this particular program. I know we're right up on the hour, so Michelle, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, sure. So there's one more question that I've seen that I want to address, and that is whether or not there will be any consideration about funding a particular number of projects from a particular state or region. And so that South Arts is always looking to serve as broad a constituency as possible, but that we're looking for the most competitive projects here. So there's not an emphasis or priority on a particular state or city. So I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. I hope that you found this helpful. I know that there are likely more questions, so we encourage you to check out the FAQs, which will be posted by Friday on the South Arts website. We're going to compile many of the questions from today, as well as ones that we've answered, as well as ones that we didn't quite have time to get to from today, and make sure that we address those in the FAQs. And if your question isn't answered, in the FAQs or in the guidelines that are posted at southarts.org. We encourage you to go ahead and reach out at partnerships@southarts.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So thank you again for joining us. This webinar will be posted online at southarts.org for anyone who wishes to review it or send it on to a friend. And I hope everyone has a great Wednesday.
Goodbye, everyone.